I want to try something. Listen. A screen door slamming somewhere down the street, a dog barking twice and then giving up, the ticking of a playing card and bicycle spokes getting louder, passing, gone. If those sounds just did something to your chest, then you and I grew up in the same country. Not a country on a map, a country in time. And that country is closed now. They don't issue visas anymore. I've been trying to figure out for months what exactly we had back there. And I'll be honest with you right up front. I started writing this thinking it was going to be a fun little list. Remember lawn darts? Remember busy signals? That kind of thing. And somewhere in the middle of writing it, the whole thing turned on me. Because I found something underneath all the fun stuff that I genuinely did not expect to find. And it changed what this video is about. So here's the deal. I'll give you the fun stuff, all of it. But stick around, because the thing I found is coming, and I promise you it's not the conclusion you think it is. Okay, let's go back. The streetlights. Nobody gave us a phone, nobody tracked our location. There was one rule, and the whole neighborhood ran on it. Be home when the streetlights come on. An entire system of parenting built on a light bulb on a wooden pole. And it mostly worked. I say mostly because in my neighborhood there was a kid. I'll call him Danny because his name was Danny. And Danny figured out that if the street light on his corner was broken, technically the rule didn't apply. So Danny, I swear this is true, threw rocks at that light until he killed it and bought himself an extra 40 minutes of freedom every night for an entire summer. Until the city fixed it and his mother, who was no fool, started using the neighbor's light instead. Checkmate, Danny. That was the whole world back then. Kids finding loopholes, mothers closing them, and not one GPS coordinate involved. You'd be 3 streets away, deep in some game that had no name and no rules. You'd see that first orange flicker come on above you, and something ancient in your body just said, "Run," and you ran, and you made it, usually. Here's a thing I only understood about 30 years too late. Our parents had no idea where we were. And I don't mean that casually. I mean, if you'd stopped my mother at 4 in the afternoon and asked her, "Where is your son right now?" her honest answer would have been, "Somewhere." Somewhere. That was the system. And she wasn't a bad mother. She was a completely normal mother. They all did it. Every morning, they released us into the world like you'd release pigeons. No tracker, no check-in, just a vague confidence that we'd come flapping back around dinner. And we did. Sunburned, starving, covered in evidence of a whole day they would never know anything about. We had entire secret lives by age 8. And look, I know what a modern parent hears in that. They hear negligence. And hold that thought because we're coming back to it. And it's more complicated than it sounds. But first, let me tell you what we actually did with all those unwatched hours, because some of it was beautiful, and some of it was extremely stupid. And honestly, the stupid parts might be the ones I'm most grateful for. When you wanted to see your friend, you walked to his house, and you knocked on the door. No text, no calling ahead, you just showed up. An uninvited human being standing on a porch, and it was completely normal. His mom opens the door, yells his name up the stairs, and either he comes out or she says, "He's at his cousin's, try tomorrow." And you say, "Okay." And that's the whole transaction. Sometimes you rode your bike 20 minutes, knocked, and nobody was home. And then, nothing. Nothing happened, you rode home. Or you went to the creek alone. The afternoon just took a different shape. I tried to explain the knocking thing to my nephew a while back, and he looked at me the way you'd look at someone describing life before indoor plumbing. He goes, "But what if he was busy?" And I said, "Then his mom told me he was busy." And my nephew goes, "That's insane. Why would you talk to his mom?" And I realized we come from a civilization where talking to your friend's mom on a porch was just a normal Tuesday. And that civilization is gone. And its people are scattered, and we are them. Sunday afternoons, 3 channels, nothing on any of them. Rain on the window, Every friend out of reach, and hours, just hours, stretching out in front of you like a desert. And you had to cross it with nothing but your own head. So you read the back of the cereal box for the 40th time. You took the radio apart to see what was inside. Sometimes it even went back together. You lay on the floor and stared at the ceiling and thought about things. And I know exactly how this part of the video is supposed to go. This is where I tell you, boredom made us creative. And fine, yes, I think it did. But I want to be honest instead of poetic for a second. A lot of that boredom was just boredom. It wasn't secretly enriching. It was Sunday, and it was raining, and it was miserable, and we hated it. And yet, and this is the part I can't get around, I can remember those empty Sunday afternoons in my body, the smell of the rain, the sound of the house. And I cannot remember a single afternoon I've spent scrolling on my phone. Not one. Thousands of hours. Gone. No trace. So make of that what you want. The boredom was awful. And somehow, it's the thing that stayed. The music. Oh man, the music. If you wanted a song, you sat by the radio for 3 hours with your finger hovering over the record button of a cassette deck, waiting, praying. And when your song finally came on, you lunged. And you still caught the DJ talking over the intro, and you kept that tape anyway. To this day, there are songs where I still expect the DJ's voice at the 7-second mark. It's burned in. My brain filed his chatter as part of the composition. Some guy from a local station is permanently featured on half the soundtrack of my youth, and he has no idea. Or you saved up for weeks, and you walked to the record store, and you carried the album home like it was a religious object, and you listened to the whole thing, both sides, while reading every word on the sleeve, who played bass, who they thanked, everything. One album could last you a month because it had to. And I'm not going to pretend the old way was convenient. It wasn't. It was ridiculous. But here's the trade nobody mentions. The kids today have every song ever recorded in their pocket, and no song that cost them anything. And it turns out the cost was where the love was hiding. Our bikes were freedom machines. The day you learned to ride, your world exploded outward. Suddenly, the next neighborhood existed. The creek existed. The woods behind the shopping center existed. We rode in packs, no helmets. We built ramps out of plywood and cinder blocks and pure optimism. And I want to tell you about the ramp of 1979, because my friend Mike had watched some daredevil on TV jump over buses, and Mike decided he would jump over his little brother, who, and this detail matters, volunteered. Lay down in the grass on the far side of the ramp, grinning, and the whole street came out to watch. And Mike pedaled from way back by the mailboxes to get his speed up and hit that ramp, and the ramp, which we had engineered with the full confidence of people who had never heard of engineering, folded, just folded flat. And Mike kind of rolled over his brother at approximately walking speed, and the brother cried. Not from injury, from disappointment. He wanted to be jumped over. Nobody was hurt. The ramp was rebuilt, worse. And that was an average Wednesday. And no adult ever found out. And that last part, no adult ever found out, that was maybe the best part of the whole country we lived in. One phone, in the kitchen, attached to the wall. Cord you could stretch around the corner for privacy you never actually got. And if you called someone and the line was busy, you got that angry little sound, and you waited. You tried again in an hour. You survived, not knowing. Being unreachable wasn't rude back then. It was just the normal condition of a human being. People were unreachable most of the day. The world kept turning. And the family phone was its own comedy. One line for everybody. My sister basically lived on it after school, and there was a whole art to lifting the receiver in the other room, 1 millimeter at a time, holding your breath, to eavesdrop on her conversation, until she heard the click and screamed your name through the house. That scream was our notification sound. If you left the house, you were gone. Properly gone. Off the grid until you came back. And I'm not going to dress that up as some profound freedom. It was just how things were. We didn't feel free. We felt normal. You only see it from here, 40 years downstream, when you realize you haven't been properly gone anywhere in about 15 years. You took your photos and then you waited a week to find out if any of them were any good. 24 exposures, no preview, no delete. And when you opened that envelope from the Photoshop, it was like a little Christmas. Half of them blurry, someone's thumb across 3 of them, and the good ones went into an album and stayed there for 40 years. My family's albums are full of photos that would be instantly deleted today. Everyone mid-blink, my dad half out of frame, a picture of what we believe is the county fair but might be a parking lot, and those are somehow the most precious ones, because that's what we actually looked like. And your show came on Thursday at 8, and if you missed it, you missed it. So the whole family arranged its evening around it. And the next morning, everyone at school had seen the same thing at the same time, and you talked about it. Television was a campfire then. Nobody chooses to wait anymore, and I get it. Waiting is annoying. I don't romantically miss the waiting, but I've noticed that nothing I get instantly feels like that envelope from the Photoshop felt. And I don't fully know what to do with that observation. So I'm just handing it to you. Here's one nobody puts on the nostalgia lists. Arguments. Arguments used to last for years because there was no way to look anything up. 2 guys could disagree about who held the home run record or how far away the moon is or whether a penny dropped off a skyscraper could kill a man, and there was no referee, no phone to settle it. So the argument just lived. It moved in. It became part of the friendship. My dad and his buddy Ray argued about one baseball statistic for, I am not exaggerating, most of a decade. It would go dormant for months and then flare up at a barbecue like an old injury. And if you really needed to know something, you had 2 options. The encyclopedia, if your family had one, which was sold to your parents by an actual door-to-door salesman, 20-something volumes, a monthly payment plan, the internet in furniture form, or option 2, you asked an adult. And the adult just made something up, with total confidence. Half of what I believed until age 25 was invented on the spot by an uncle. And you know what? There was something kind of great about it. Not the wrong facts, the arguing, the wondering. A question could stay open for years. You'd chew on it, revisit it, argue it again. Now every question dies within 9 seconds of being born. Someone pulls out a phone, reads the answer in a flat voice, and the conversation just stops. We settled the argument and lost the sport. Saturday morning, the holiest hours of the week. Cartoons existed in one place at one time, roughly 7 to 11 on Saturday, like a tide. You could not summon them on demand. So you set an internal alarm clock. On the one day you were allowed to sleep in, we woke up voluntarily at dawn for cartoons. No child has ever risen early for a thing they could watch whenever they wanted. Scarcity got us out of bed. Cereal bowl the size of your head, pajamas, blanket, 3 inches from the screen, in the exact spot your mother said would ruin your eyes. And for 4 hours, the world was perfect. And here's the thing, when it ended, it ended. The tide went out, sports came on, gray adult programming, and you didn't sit there scrolling for more. There was no more. So you got dressed and went outside. And half the sweetness of Saturday morning was the whole week of boring Tuesdays spent looking forward to it. I've watched my grandkids flip through 40,000 cartoons on a menu, and they look, honestly, kind of miserable doing it, like tiny, bored emperors. And I don't say anything, because who wants a lecture from Grandpa? But I think it constantly. We drank from the garden hose, rode in the beds of pickup trucks, played on metal slides that got hot enough in July to brand livestock. And we had lawn darts, actual weighted spears, sold as a children's game. If you're too young to know lawn darts, look them up. And then look at the year they were banned. And know that between those 2 dates, we were out there, throwing spears at each other's feet to see who would flinch. And now, let me stop the fun for a minute, because I made a promise at the start of this video, and it's time to keep it. I told you I found something while writing this that I didn't expect. Here it is. I was making my list of all this glorious freedom, and a quieter memory kept knocking, and it was this. I was 6 years old, letting myself into an empty house with a key on a string around my neck, making my own dinner, and being, if I'm honest, lonely. A lot. And once I let that memory in, its friends came too. The kid up the street whose bullying nobody stopped because no adult was ever around to see it. The things some kids from that world are still not able to talk about, because back then, there was no one to tell. They have a name for us in the research, one of the least parented generations in modern history, and I always laughed that off as a badge of honor, tough little survivors. And then, one afternoon, writing this very script, it stopped being funny. So no, it was not a utopia, and I'm not going to sell you one. And that discovery rearranged everything. Because suddenly our whole generation's story made sense to me in a way it never had. You know what we did. The least supervised children in history. When we grew up, we became the most supervising parents in history. The helicopter parents, that's us. That's not a coincidence. That's a correction. We knew exactly what was out there and all that beautiful freedom, because we'd met it. So we built the trackers and the check-ins and the schedules, and we wrapped our kids in all the attention we never got. Out of love. Real love, I want to be clear. But here's the question I can't shake, and it's the real question of this whole video. In fixing what was broken, did we also throw out what was working? Because we didn't just remove the dangers, we removed the unwatched hours themselves. And the unwatched hours were not just where the bad things happened, they were where we happened. The confidence, the improvisation, the ability to be alone with yourself. All of it was built in exactly those hours no adult ever saw. We kept our kids safe from the world by keeping them from the world. And the anxious, screen-lit, never-alone childhood that took over is not obviously a happier one. And I think most of us quietly know that. So what do we actually do with this? Because I refuse to end on, wasn't it lovely, here lies a childhood. Look, we can't give anyone 1978 back. And knowing what I now remember, I'm not sure I'd hand it over unedited anyway. But we're the last people alive who know both sides of it. What unwatched freedom costs and what it builds. Nobody younger has the full picture. They only ever saw the safe version. That makes us useful, not nostalgic, useful. And it cashes out in small, almost silly ways. Let the grandkid climb the tree while you deliberately, heroically look the other way. Let an afternoon have no plan. When a bored kid comes to you whining that there's nothing to do, resist the urge to fix it. Nothing to do is not a problem. It's an ingredient. And maybe once in a while say the old words, go outside, come back when the streetlights come on. And then, this is the hard part, actually let them go a little. We're the only ones left who know from the inside that a kid can be trusted with their own hours. If we don't insist on it, that knowledge dies with us, quietly, and nobody will even notice what went missing. One last thing before you go. Tonight, or whenever, go stand outside for a minute when the streetlights come on. Just stand there. Let it come back. The grass smell, the screen doors, your mother's voice calling your name down the block. One long note, stretched out like taffy on the evening air. And think a quiet thank you toward whoever it was that let you out into the world and trusted you to come home. They got some things wrong. We know that now. But they got that one thing right. And you've been carrying it ever since. If this brought even one of those moments back, share it with somebody who was out there with you. A sibling, the kid from 3 doors down if you can still track them down, and tell me in the comments the one thing I missed, the one that's yours. And somebody please tell me your neighborhood had a Danny too. I refuse to believe he was unique. I read all the comments. It's honestly the best part of doing this. Subscribe if you want more trips back. Tap the like button so this finds the other people who remember. All right? The streetlights are on. Time to head home. I'll see you in the next one.